You asked me what I saw when I looked at you. What do you see when you look at me?
Today is Friday, April the 25th, 2025, and today I will be using some screenshots from the book High Risk, Children Without a Conscience. And so I wanted to share in advance ways to improve the quality of the video so that you're able to read the screenshots. And I want to help you to know it's important that you use the settings button in the video, not within the YouTube app, to be able to change the pixel rate for the video so that you can better read the text. I'd like to deal with how the government intentionally compromises physical and psychological health and wellness to secure a workforce and the military. I want to talk about why they need to do this, the core issue being that they have made themselves incapacitated, and the evidence that there has been long-term awareness of the problems with an unwillingness to address the core issues. Do you want people to be safe, healthy, and happy? And where is the evidence? 2 days ago, I posted this message. The human supply chain's making it simple to understand for women. A talking head who was kicking Justin Bieber while he's down came across my feed this afternoon. It irritated me because although I will rant about people living their best life being part of the problem for the rest of us, once someone has been dropped from the top of the chain isn't the time to lay into them. It's almost sadistic to do so, which makes this podcaster who is low on the supply chain himself also part of the problem. This is a hard post to write because not only are root causes for oppression simple to understand, but the people responsible are not hidden. They just aren't popular to the general public. Despite this, people cannot seem to get beyond their own immature self-interest to accept there is so much more available. They simply cannot access it because they believe they need their oppressors or their entire lives will collapse. We deserve better, but that doesn't matter if people do not want better. I once had a vision of a very wealthy man watching a live report of the stock exchange crashing, the entire system folding in on itself, and him losing everything. He collapsed into complete hysteria while looking at his phone and was about to throw himself from a balcony. I was absolutely astonished because despite what was happening on the television screen, his power was on, his cable was working, his phone was still logged into the internet. The only thing that changed was the stock exchange and his account balances on his phone. He still had food, clothing, personal transportation, a place to stay, his family, but he was ready to attempt suicide because in that moment, the economic report he wanted didn't happen. Maybe he felt his entire life was ruined based on this report, but was it? Even if he really lost all or a substantial amount of his money, what might really be at risk here? I then defined husbandry, the culture or the cultivation or production of plants or animals, the scientific control and management of a branch of farming and especially of domestic animals, the control or judicious use of resources, and the archaic definition, which is the care of a household. Husbandry. At the foundation of human husbandry and supply chains is a group of people who need to feel important, who have also created their own dependency upon the people they oppress. They have also crafted their own disabilities and social, emotional, psychological, and intellectual development as a result. They fear being forced to take care of themselves because they haven't learned how. This despite calling themselves civilized. A better term would probably be civicized. But that's not a real word, despite how functional it works to describe these people. Civics, defined as the study or science of the privileges and obligations of citizens, as well as the rights and duties, political and practical aspects of citizenship. Think about well-known stories like the biography of Moses, that part where his people were oppressed by being forced to build useless projects for useless reasons because it was necessary for useless people to keep their slaves busy and tired. Can you see how not much has changed? Moses was an adopted Hebrew who lived as royalty in the house of Hebrew oppressors who had raised him as their kin. Doesn't that still happen in 2025? Doesn't it make sense why a constant supply of human babies are necessary to sustain this system? The babies they want, not all babies. Moses was spared during one of many historic genocides recounted in the Bible and other historical documents and texts. Slaughtering babies and toddlers to quell population growth, especially in groups of people who cling to family cohesion, is biblical. It always starts at home. It will never not start at the level of each individual person in relationship with the people within their household, which then extends to their participation in the greater community. Moses wanted more for his people. What happened to him? Joseph, Jacob's son, wanted more for his people. What happened to him? Jesus wanted more for his people. What happened to him? Abraham Lincoln wanted more for his people. What happened to him? John Kennedy Jr. wanted more for his people. What happened to him? Martin Luther King Jr. wanted more for his people. What happened to him? Mahatma Gandhi wanted more for his people. What happened to him? Mother Teresa wanted more for her people. What happened to her? Malcolm X Little wanted more for his people. What happened to him? Nelson Mandela wanted more for his people. What happened to him? Pope John Paul II wanted more for his people. What happened to him? Even given the efforts of all these people, what happened to the people they all wanted better for? Where are these people in 2025 and what are they doing? We have always been and will always be the majority. Always. Now I want to share some recent data on the increase in abortions in the state of Virginia. And I want to say to you that this is a warning and not something to fear. When you know in advance what is coming, you're in a better situation to prepare and to make the necessary changes to prevent. But it's important not to turn away and to look at this so that you can give yourself and the rest of us an opportunity to do something about something that you may be concerned about, anxious about, or fear before it has an opportunity to occur. The importance and significance in the ridiculously high spike in abortions reported in the state of Virginia is that the Trump abortion ban, which is blamed for this, occurred primarily or affected primarily states in the South. However, we see from the graphic and the data that many other states in the North are also being affected. It's important to pay attention to which states are being the most impacted by the lack of an abortion ban. Now let's look at some screenshots of pages from the book High Risk: Children Without a Conscience. I actually purchased and read this book in the late 90s, and it set the tone for the level of advocacy I included in my professional and clinical work because I could see the problem coming and I wanted to do whatever was necessary to prevent it. Part of the method to secure a workforce and people who are willing to serve in the military is creating a desperation to work. As you read through these screenshots, I'd like for you to consider and ask yourself the question what the implications are for children who are removed from their biological families, then dwell in foster care and are ultimately discharged from care as adults without any family support. What economic employment options are typically available to the undereducated, young, and single mothers? When a young, emancipated female becomes pregnant, what options are available for her to be self-supporting? If she is working, What kind of medical leave can she anticipate being made available to her? Why are policies on medical leave inconsistent between public and private employment? Why are there a limited number of public jobs available? And even of the public jobs available, why is there inconsistency in medical leave at the local, state, and federal level for those jobs? Lastly, how is daycare like foster care, especially for infants, toddlers, and young children? What daycare options are available for anyone who requires this type of care for their young children? I know considering these questions and the answers to them can be overwhelming, but please stay with me so that we can fully expose and understand what the issues are. Pause the video, play some music, take a deep breath, chant, pray, whatever you need to do to be able to stay with me, to allow yourself to consider these questions and their answers, because you need to understand whether or not our government wants us to be safe, healthy, and happy, whether our religious institutions want us to be safe, healthy, and happy, whether our legislators want us to be safe, healthy, and happy. Let's look at some of the environmental issues that contribute to our inability to not only be physically healthy, but also emotionally and psychologically healthy. 5 days ago, I posted this message. Why being unhappy isn't your fault, how to evaluate the evidence. Yesterday, I posted a message on how the brain and mind work together to create the experience of happiness. I included questions for contemplation on how environmental factors contribute to the social, emotional, and psychological barriers to having that experience fully. At the risk of creating some anxiety around the process of seriously investigating the causes of dysfunction in your health and emotions, I want to share with you what the Environmental Protection Agency reports on its website about one of the 5 standard approved air pollutants which are monitored and reported, and for which a formula is used to calculate an overall contamination level. This is reported as an Air Quality Index, AQI score, along with a guideline for the level of activity an individual can anticipate being comfortably able to engage in based upon the breathability of the air at any given time during the day. This is traumatic, which also makes this abuse. Can you see that? These ranges are set based upon public health data called epidemiology, which informs policymakers on the effects of any exposures so that regulations are set as a protective measure. People can live with these pollutants, but they obviously cannot be fully healthy. Air quality indexing is forecast, which means it can be predicted because of the causes that are known. Contemplate that a moment. Forecasted as in like weather forecasting when you check the weather every day. There will always be some pollutants because the human process of creating something plants and animals don't do will occasionally cause this. When a contaminant reaches the level of completely saturating the natural environment, it has been allowed to continue for too long. Zero contamination or pollutants should be a goal. It isn't. So you have to ask yourself, why is that? Breathable air and drinkable water should be a critical priority. Everyone, including policymakers, have to breathe. Do you understand where I'm going with this and why I have been jumping up and down about it since 2022? Great. Here's the information on the most heavily used contaminant in Norfolk, Virginia, super tiny dust particles, from the Environmental Protection Agency website. Health and environmental effects of particulate matter. The size of particles is directly linked to their potential for causing health problems. Small particles less than 10 micrometers in diameter pose the greatest problems because they can get deep into your lungs, and some may even get into your bloodstream. Exposure to such particles can affect both your lungs and your heart. Numerous scientific studies have linked particle pollution exposure to a variety of problems, including premature death in people with heart or lung disease, non-fatal heart attacks, irregular heartbeat, aggravated asthma, decreased lung function, increased respiratory systems such as irritation of the airways, coughing, or difficulty breathing. People with heart or lung diseases, children, older adults, minority populations, and low socioeconomic status populations are the most likely to be affected by particle pollution exposure, either because they are more sensitive or may have higher exposures. Let me read that again. And low socioeconomic status populations are the most likely to be affected by particle pollution exposure, either because they are more sensitive or may have higher exposures. Environmental effects, visibility impairment. Fine particles, PM 2.5, are the main cause of reduced visibility or haze in parts of the United States, including many of our treasured national parks and wilderness areas. And pause, this is important because I have mentioned many times that here in Hampton Roads, we can no longer see the stars in the night sky. A side note, impaired visibility also means our body's need for sunlight, which helps metabolism and provides supportive dosing of vitamin D, is compromised. Consider the health effects of this deficiency. Environmental damage. Particles can be carried over long distances by wind and then settle on ground or water. Depending on their chemical composition, the effects of this settling may include makes lakes and streams acidic, changing the nutrient balance in coastal waters and large river basins, depleting the nutrients in soil, damaging sensitive forests and farm crops, affecting the diversity of ecosystems, contributing to acid rain effects. Materials damage. PM can stain and damage stone and other materials, including culturally important objects such as statues and monuments, which is significant because I have spoken about how pollen in this area will damage the paint on your vehicle, and is why many vehicle owners will frequently wash or wipe down their vehicles to protect them. How does it make you feel to know that the government is fully aware of the health impacts of policies set by agency leaders and legislated by politicians? These are the facts. Why then do I complain about the behavior of people like Jasmine Crockett and other millennial legislators who have turned the oversight committee meetings into reality television shows ripe for social media shares? It's disrespectful, considering the health and living conditions we are all forced to suffer through daily. Where are your priorities? A rational approach to all of this is to look at the health effects of all 5 pollutants and to compare that to any medical problems you or your loved ones are suffering. This includes psychological difficulties, which must be medicated to improve your brain's capacity to control your body's hormonal systems. There are formulas for this kind of chemistry, which inform the medical and pharmaceutical industries on treatments to preserve life in unlivable conditions. Does that make sense to you? You don't need a medical degree to do this kind of research. You need to understand your own body and how it feels at any given time. You need to understand what treatments are working and which are not, and why. If you are told, for example, that a medication should relieve or improve X symptom or symptoms, you should understand that the contamination where you live has a pollutant that affects that part of the body. Then, if the medication does not work, you have to consider that as a possible reason. As of today, there is probably something you will have to buy to offset exposure in your home, or something you can wear or install in your car or business, etc., to help you personally and or employees in reducing exposure. Should that be your burden? What about everybody else? What about people who can't afford to buy any of that stuff? Consider that as well. It's not your fault. It was never your fault. It should not be happening. It should have never happened. The only solution is full accountability. Start with the Department of Defense, the political arm of the military. It's a failure to protect. For example, biological and psychological military research funded through the Department of Defense, all military academies conducting this kind of research, etc. And then I provide a video that you might watch to gain some additional evidence and perspective. Let's talk more about how the desperation to work is created. 2 days ago, I wrote this post. This morning, I woke up grieved with this problem on my mind. I wasn't thinking about this movie specifically, but as I lamented about the problem at the center of it, this movie came to mind as a way to describe what is troubling my soul. The cost of medical care. That people worry about how they will pay to receive care for conditions that are essentially caused by poor environmental, nutritional, and safety policy, regulations, monitoring, and accountability. That people worry about medical insurance to offset the luxury pricing of medical evaluations, procedures, and long-term treatment because it can be so expensive that people lose everything they have to cover the associated costs. People who trust the insurance system without fully considering how it is used to not only oppress people financially, but to manage how their medical care and treatment is provided. How both the patient and professional treatment providers depend upon these systems to live and make a living in ways that their intuitive thoughts about what makes sense are dismissed because it isn't covered. I've written numerous times about the concerns I have about children's hospitals and medical research on children, as well as the elderly and veterans. I get quite a bit of pushback because there are thousands of people who have children who have been diagnosed with life-threatening conditions who were saved by treatments received at these facilities. In addition, it isn't the facilities themselves that save their children, but the people who work in these facilities who became like a family when they were in crisis, fearing the worst for the people who mean the most to them. My frustrations and the way I present them feel to these families like an attack on people they love and respect for what they did to give their children or other family members a fighting chance to survive. I completely get that. However, these are not the people I target. It is administrators of both hospitals and medical training schools, as well as pharmaceutical corporations and their corporate investors who I am speaking about because they are the problem. People forget how often I have advocated for medical teams, doctors, nurses, technicians who are committed to what they do and are invested in bringing wellness to the people they treat. I have also tried my best to provide concrete evidence of regeneration, the function of disease, and how both medical training and research are designed to help keep professionals working to cure symptoms, not heal dysfunctions of the body, which are caused by all the things I mentioned previously. Once challenged, most of them have agreed with me and have adjusted their own protocols accordingly. This includes how they diagnose and bill against how they treat, which always works in the best interest of patients, not corporate entities who benefit from the system operating oppressively to keep people sick and in debt. It's heartbreaking to consider how money has become so intertwined with our existence that it shapes the way people think about each other, how other people should be treated based on a financial value judgment. How much is this necessity going to cost? And to then evaluate what to do next based upon that. We're talking about health and quality of life. I'm asking you to really think about that, which is harder to do if you've never been faced with a situation as depicted in this movie. It happens. Maybe not in such extreme ways, but just as intensely and as emotionally. Why does anyone ever have to suffer for any reason? And who is responsible for that? These are the people I target, and this is the reason. An injustice unresolved for one person is an injustice unresolved for every person, because left unchecked, it will inevitably affect everyone eventually. Let's go back to the 1987 book High Risk children without a conscience, and appreciate that the theme of this book is trying to prevent children from being in situations that would cause them to lose their sense of morality, to become essentially sociopaths or psychopaths, for example. Here are a couple of additional screenshots on how these children grow into adults, who they become, why, and how. I'd like to conclude with this post from last night, as well as the clip that I am sharing from this particular movie, The Equalizer 2014, Drawing Lines of Distinction. Anyone who has followed me for any length of time knows how much I love the Robert McCall character of the Equalizer series, the movie. This scene tells the story of why. It gives me an opportunity to help people understand why I do not give up on people until they have demonstrated they cannot be saved because they cannot be trusted. The tagline for Robert's character is, "What do you see when you look at me?" This scene gives exactly the contrast needed to understand that everyone you may believe is against you and your principles is not. It should help you to evaluate the behavior of people you have allowed into your life who fit the description, but for whom you struggle to understand intent. Tonight, I responded to an anonymous post in a trauma recovery group I am active in that essentially asked, how do I deal with the shame of knowing I've done shitty things to people who no longer like me, although I've genuinely changed? I wrote, I haven't dealt with this personally, but I have helped people who have. This is usually only a concern if the person wants to reconcile a relationship with someone who was either directly impacted by their behavior or became aware of behavior towards another person that they saw as a character flaw they could not accept. The answer is to have an offering. And what I mean by that is the person must become who they needed when they were hurt or abused for someone who is at risk of being hurt in similar ways to the hurt they experience and or have inflicted. It cannot be the person they have hurt, but the more offerings or effort a person is willing to accumulate, the more likely they are to be able to demonstrate to those who knew their previous behavior that they have genuinely changed. Your offering, your effort, demonstrates that you fully understand the impact of what you've done in the past and what must be done differently to not only ensure you won't do the same thing again, but that you are committed to ensuring it will not happen to anyone else, not on your watch. The process of getting to a place where you are equipped to do something like this must begin with an understanding of why you did what you did. You must deal with the grief and shame because it's a cancer. You cannot do that until you have made the commitment to stop and really examine what has been happening and why. But you can release the guilt and shame even if the people you have hurt cannot forgive you. You can still be a hero for someone else. I'm trying to break the strongholds on your mind, like Stockholm Syndrome. Become the solution, not part of the problem. Be the change you want to see in the world. What's the difference between being supreme and being a supremacist? As a disclaimer, I mentioned that I do not recommend the Equalizer series, the movie, for people who are squeamish or triggered by graphic violence. I also do not condone violence as an offering, but I do have a full expectation that people who have taken on the responsibility to protect us do so with equity and efficiency.
He's not coming back. Had enough?
You certainly have my attention.
Because I can keep going, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, body by body. Or you can call your boss and tell him to shut down his operation tonight.
That's not much of an offer.
That's the only one you're gonna get. When you pray for rain, you gotta deal with the mud too.
When you look at me, what do you see? The answer's nothing. I have no feelings about you one way or the other. You're like lint or a bottle cap. You're just a thing to remove.
I knew a Russian police captain back in the day. He told me about a case he worked on. I can't remember the guy's name. He was a famous scholar, lived in Moscow. He was a humanitarian, an author. Anyway, he decided to share his abundance with someone less fortunate. And even though he had 5 beautiful children, he opened his home to a 6th, an orphan 12-year-old boy. Kid had been pounded by the system from an early age, troubled, prone to violence, a lost cause. Stop me if you know this one.
No, carry on.
Okay. So this good man opened his home to this boy. And when the boy stole from him, this good man loved him anyway. When the boy failed in school, this good man showed understanding and patience. When the boy lied and cheated and clawed and fought, this good man showed compassion and love, until the boy who had never felt anything like being wanted or loved, he finally did. The man had broken through. By all accounts, it was a miracle. 1 week later, intruders broke into the man's house, killed the man and his wife in bed. They said some small things were stolen, things a child might steal. No one knows for sure. The man's children were sent off to live with relatives. The boy, the orphan, shipped back to hell. Just when he finally had a chance at life, it was snatched away by 2 bullets.
It's a well-known story.
They ever catch who did it?
Did they?
Maybe they didn't look in the right place. Sometimes the answer's right in front of you. Я думаю, мальчик убил. Yeah, I think the boy did it. I think the boy was scared that his foster parents would wake up one day and realize that he wasn't worth it, like all the others had. And he couldn't bear the thought that this man, this good man, would do that to him, would throw him away, like a piece of lint or a bottle cap. So he decided not to find out. What do you think, Nikolai?
You think you know me. You strike me as a sentimental man, Mr. McCall. That's surprising. I don't possess that chip. I never could understand what comes from feeling that way, except weakness.
The men I killed, your men, I gave them a chance. They made their decision. I'm giving you the opportunity to make yours.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You let me know when you decide.
Of course.
I've done some bad things in my life, Nikolai. Things I'm not proud of. I promised someone that I loved very much that I would never go back to being that person. But for you, I'm going to make an exception. You asked me what I saw when I looked at you. What do you see when you look at me?